It's like the story in the second part of Harry Potter, right? Do you remember that? So you have Moaning Myrtle, she inhabits the bathroom, she's always diving into toilets, and don't they find the understructure of Hogwarts by going through that bathroom into the subterranean elements? Yeah, so that's a good, that realm of symbolism is something like, underneath, this is exactly what the case is with the second Harry Potter story, is that underneath the edifice of culture, and that would be Hogwarts in that particular story, there's a subterranean realm, and in that subterranean realm lurk things that can paralyze you if you look at them. That's the basilisk. Now what do you think happens if a rabbit sees a fox? What does it do? It freezes. Why?
So it can't be seen?
Absolutely, right. The rabbit assumes that it's camouflaged. And so as long as it doesn't move, then maybe there's some chance that the predator won't see it. And so the idea that you turn to stone when you look at something that's predatory and reptilian, I mean, that's an old idea. You know, God only knows how old that is. It's, you know, in the Harry Potter story, the second story, is almost a precise duplicate of the story of St. George. And if you look up St. George on the net, if you Google St. George, you'll see that St. George is usually on a horse, and what he's doing is slaying a dragon, usually. It's not a very big dragon, usually, but it's bigger than his horse, but it's particularly nasty looking. And it comes out of a cave, and he frees a virgin from its grasp. That's exactly what happens in Harry Potter, right? Because it's Ginny that's down there. And you remember, Harry gets bitten by the basilisk, right? And it's kind of poisoned, right? And so he's going to die, and then what happens? Yeah, the phoenix comes, and so what's a phoenix? It's
symbol of rebirth?
Yeah, it's a symbol of death and rebirth, exactly. And so what the story, the Harry Potter story says is that if you're fighting a dragon, a snake, something terrible, something that will paralyze you if you look at it, and you're doing that in order to redeem something from that encounter, because you often learn things when you do something that you're afraid of. In fact, almost all learning occurs in spite of fear, right? Because to learn something, you have to explore something new, and that's usually something that's frightening. And so what that means is that if you're willing to face something that's frightening, you can garner something of value. Now, it also may well mean, in the context of that story, and you see this in the romance that underlies the first part of Harry Potter, is that, you know, the man who's capable of standing up to predatory reptiles is also the one who is most likely to attract women. And I think that that's been a truth since God only knows when too. I mean, we have no idea. Harry gets bitten by this basilisk, and part of the reason that the story shows that is because it wants to tell you, the story wants to tell you, so to speak, that the danger that you face when you voluntarily confront something you're afraid of in order to learn is actually a danger. It's real. If you're going to confront something that's dangerous enough and informative enough to like virtually kill you, and you're going to survive, what does that mean? It means that your capacity for death and renewal is what saves you. And so, you know, you think about this, partly what it means is that, like, there you are, but you learn something. Okay, well, once you learn something, you're not the same as you were before you learned it, right? There's a transformation. So that means you're the same as you are because you're still there, but you're also different. And then you might also ask yourself, well, what do you give up when you learn something? And that's an interesting question, because you very seldom learn something that's completely without precedent. Now, if you do, that's really shocking generally, but you generally don't. What happens is that you already have a framework of evaluation that you're using to interpret the world. And it's good enough to get you from place to place, but it's not 100% accurate. And when you encounter something you didn't expect, or something that's frightening, so that you have to transform your knowledge, generally what happens is you have to lose some of what you already presume before you can learn something new. You know, it's like a prejudice or an oversimplification or an element of your ignorance has to be allowed to die before you can incorporate the information and then grow. And so you might say, well, death is the precondition for learning, at least symbolically speaking, and that's exactly what the phoenix is attempting to represent in the Harry Potter story. Now, who owns the phoenix? Dumbledore, right? And he's sort of god of Hogwarts, so to speak, you know. So the phoenix stands in the same relationship to Dumbledore that Christ stands in relationship to God the Father in Christianity. It's exactly the same kind of idea. Well, it's not exactly the same, obviously, but the underlying structure of the idea is very similar. And if you remember, maybe, what happens to Harry Potter at the very end of the series? What process does he have to go through? He dies, right? And then he comes back to life, right? And he has to die and come back to life in order to defeat evil. It's pretty funny because, you know, a lot of people, especially fundamentalists in the US, were all over Harry Potter for its hypothetically anti-Christian occultism, but, you know, the fundamental story, I wouldn't say it's Christian exactly, because it's actually older than Christianity itself. But the main themes in Harry Potter are, like, Christian symbolism informs the main themes to a great degree. You know, and it's funny because most of the time when you go see this sort of thing, how many of you watched all the Harry Potter movies? Yeah, like what the hell's up with that, you know? This woman got people reading 700-page books when they were 10 years old. I suspect a lot of you were those people. You know, so why were you so interested in that stuff? For God's sake, it's about a magic orphan. What's wrong with you people, you know? Magic orphans? You know, but for some reason, why an orphan? Well, Superman's an orphan too. And if you go on Wikipedia, it's kind of an interesting thing to do. Look up superhero orphans. It's like 500 of them. You know, and that's a very it also goes along with the idea of having two sets of parents, which is also characteristic both of Superman and of Harry Potter, right? Because Harry has his day-to-day, you know, parents that aren't his real parents, and then he has his heavenly parents who are his magic parents. And, you know, this representation here that I've got up in front of you, and I was telling you a little bit about that in the last lecture, you could say in some sense those are representations of your magic parents. And so you can think about it this way. It's like you have a mother and a father, and those are your local mothers and fathers. And whether or not you get along with them, or whether or not they were any good for you, or whether you understand them, or anything like that, in some sense is irrelevant, because they're not your real parents. Your real parents are something more like nature, biology, the unknown, something like that, and culture. We kind of think of that as nature and nurture, you know, which is also a symbolic idea.